Alright, so I'm here today because I want to talk about Baby Reindeer yet again. This is actually my third video on Baby Reindeer. If you're new to the channel, I strongly suggest and urge you actually watch those first two videos because it's me praising a lot of the show. However, this discussion is going to be focusing on the absolutely unfortunate, unhinged, and wild discourse that we've been getting from TikTok and like kind of younger generations about this show. I think it's absolutely nuts and I want to get into why. But in order to fully understand my opinion on the show, I do suggest you watch those first two episodes. Aside from that, let's just go. There have been so many weird takes ever since the internet has got a hold of this show, and they're so unfortunate and painful to watch. Maybe the most juicy part of this discourse is the fact that TikTok has become an army of Marthas against or for Richard Gadd, depending how you want to look at it. This show came out, it was about things that happened to him 5 to 10 years ago that he shut the book on, and he wants to make a series exploring it now that it's done and wrapped up, and all of TikTok has decided, why don't we reopen this? We love true crime. Let's solve this for you.
Baby Reindeer creator Richard Gadd has asked fans to stop speculating on who the real life people are from the show. This comes after one of Richard's friends, Sean Foley, was accused of being the real life character of Darian. Now, Sean is the artistic director at the Birmingham Rep, and he has been receiving lots of abuse from people who think that he is the character in real life. He tweeted that police have been informed and are investigating all defamatory, abusive and threatening posts against me. Richard then also shared on his Instagram story saying, "Hi everyone, people I love, have worked with and admire, including Sean Foley, are unfairly getting caught up in speculation. Please don't speculate on who any of the real life people could be. That's not the point of our show. Lots of love, Richard." Fans are also convinced that they have found a video of Richard doing a comedy stand-up where Martha is in the audience laughing. Richard has also revealed that Martha may have not gone to prison in real life. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched it, Martha pleads guilty to stalking and is sentenced to 9 months in prison, whilst Donnie gets a 5-year restraining order. However, in a recent interview when Richard was asked what happened to Martha, he just said that the situation was resolved. And himself and the production team have gone to great lengths to protect the people's identities.
This is absolutely nuts. Now, we actually saw this happen with the whole Quiet on Set documentary. A few TikTok channels got really carried away with basically being like, yes, Dan Schneider definitely assaulted Amanda Bynes and we're going to find the proof. And now the TikTok army is sitting there going, no, we are going to find the real life Martha and we are going to find the real life Darian and we are going to get them both justice for what they put Richard Gadd through. Now, first off, I think this is really just a fundamental misunderstanding of the show. Richard Gadd has got in countless interviews and said that he has empathy for Martha. He has understanding of Martha. Baked into the DNA of the Netflix series was him consistently exploring the idea that she's mentally ill, she's a victim of circumstance too. And the very ending of that show where he's listening to the voicemails is meant to add this idea of empathy to Martha. I'm not saying she's innocent. You are very much meant to get the sense from the show and from Richard Gadd's interviews that justice is done. He isn't stalked anymore. And while they can never talk because she's nuts, he does understand and have some empathy for her. And the idea that TikTok's going around being like, we found Fiona Harvey, she's the real Martha, look at all these tweets. And now, yes, credit to TikTok army. I do think they found the real Martha. Look at all these tweets, they are eerily similar. Specifically the hanging of the curtains one and a bunch of stuff about Diet Coke. Like, look, TikTok, you found her. Like, you probably found her. She then went to the newspaper and did an interview about how she was misrepresented. Leave her alone.
So the real Martha Scott from Baby Reindeer is speaking out about how the show is complete bullshit. She spoke out in an interview the other day saying the show has resulted in certain serious threats she's been getting, actually claiming that she is the victim here and not Richard Gadd, and that she's received death threats as a result of the show and that a lot of things he has claimed is not true, saying as a result of the show she's been surviving on 2 hours sleep a night due to the stress and worry that it's caused her. Then goes on to say that she has not seen Baby Reindeer, but I have seen various things. She then goes on to say that she was in Richard Gadd's company on occasions but didn't stalk him like he claims in the show. She then goes on to say that the story is a gross intrusion of her privacy and that she hasn't seen him for 12 years. She also then went on to say that she got no notification that this show was happening, and then she found out in the news, like all of us, saying he had written a show for a festival 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought, oh my god. She then went on to criticize more of the depiction of herself, saying that the woman that they used for the actress of Martha does not look anything like her.
Leave her alone. leave Richard Gadd alone. You're not going to get her in jail somehow. You don't need to dox her. You don't need to put her through anything. This is really, really unfortunate behavior from TikTok. All this needed to be was like, hey, I think we found her, and leave it. But this constant harassment and digging in is absolutely insane. On top of that, I've seen pages that are literally contacting Richard Gadd directly and being like, hey, is this Martha? Hey, is this Martha? I think we found her. We need to do something about her. This is cruel to the real life Martha. This is also incredibly cruel to Richard, and also just so lacking in self-awareness. This dude literally made a show where he's like, stalking was really bad for my mental health. And now these people are spamming him with paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, being like, oi, 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 Richard, oi, 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 doing the exact same thing. You've all become a bunch of Marthas. There's literally this TikTok channel that I think figured out the Fiona Harvey thing first, but he's been like bullshitting text messages and being like, look, Richard Gadd has had to reach out to me and send emails to me and text me and Instagram DM me to stop me revealing the truth. And like, look, this is the most clearly trying to get famous guy I think I've ever seen. Did he maybe actually find out who the real Martha was in real life? Yes, but he's been forging text messages and correspondence with Richard Gadd. Richard Gadd is not this stupid. It is such a clearly forged screenshot. It's actually kind of insulting. I really love the idea that we're meant to believe that Richard Gadd is sitting there going, I truly love your work, to some random TikTok artist who has just been obsessively stalking him and the real life Martha. Like, really? The long story short about this TikTok creator is I think he was one of the first people to find out about the Fiona Harvey on Richard Gadd's Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, which allegedly is the real life Martha. He then went to TikTok, said he found it, got a bit of virality, and now I guess he wants to keep the virality going. So he's making up fake message conversations with Richard Gadd, of Richard Gadd being like, you better stop this. I know your page is huge, but like, you need to stop this. This isn't right. This is the fakest fake message I think I've ever seen. Let me just read it out to you. Hello, Nay Dial. I truly love your work and the attention you are bringing to the show, but you are also causing me some potential legal trouble. As if Richard Gadd would just say that. The guy that has a Netflix show under his belt, a massive legal team, you really think he's just gonna like come out and say that to this guy? Like, this is such clout fishing. You know, this is such like, oh, make sure you follow me so you can see the truth that no one else wants you to see. Like, come on, man. I'm not saying you are right or wrong, but with posts hitting large numbers, fucking hell, I'm personally having to reach out in hope we can contain this. Please can you remove all posts regarding Miss Fiona Harvey? All other posts are fine. Glad you enjoyed the show. Thanks. This is not a real message. Or I can't just say this is the most forged bullshit I think I've ever seen. This is like nutty behavior. Anyways, but then this nutcase apparently replied to Richard's message and said, hi Richard, I really enjoyed the show, and like a lot of people, it has sent me down a rabbit hole when the Twitter account appeared belonging to Fiona. It was blatantly obvious she was Martha. In the show, you mentioned that she says certain phrases, and they match word for word with her Twitter post from 2014 from the Diet Coke. Blah, 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 blah. This is like, there's no punctuation here. I'm not reading all of this. But I think what gets more interesting is what is brought up in the back end of this nutty guy's message. Now, it's blanked out, but I have to assume he's talking about Darian. But basically, he makes a vague threat and says, I think there will be a lot of animosity to come with people trying to find out who Darian is. The show was 90% about Martha Scott when Darian was such a nasty, vile character. And I think what is getting to people about that is they don't know who he is and if he is still in the industry or a similar industry doing similar things. I wish you all the success with the show and the best for the future. Thanks. So first off, vaguely threatening message to Richard, but I doubt Richard has even opened it. But secondly, it brings me to my next big point. People are trying to find out who the real Darian is in this like weird pseudo like vigilante, like, oh, we're going to bring him to justice and we're going to get him. They went to a guy that is one of Richard's friends who has like a striking resemblance to Darian and basically canceled him. He's had to step down from his job and they're like celebrating this on TikTok as like a victory. They're like, oh, we got him. He's gone. So Sean Foley is one of Richard Gadd's friends who has now basically been cancelled by TikTok, has had to leave his job for a while, and is just friends with Richard Gadd. Like, he just happens to have a striking resemblance to the actor that plays Darian in the show. So Richard Gadd had to make this statement. People I love, have worked with, and admire, including Sean Foley, are unfairly getting caught up in speculation. Please don't speculate on who any of the real life people could be. That's not the point of our show. Lots of love, Richard. So yeah, people, instead of watching this show as this like beautiful, powerful kind of look at trauma and cycles of abuse and the way it impacts boundary setting and relationships moving forward, are instead going like, it's time to solve the case of who the real Darian is. We're gonna get him. Is it an interesting idea to sort of talk about the fact that he could still be out there, and does Richard Gadd maybe have a responsibility to expose him? Sure, but it's also like, you don't know. Maybe he did. And on top of that, he doesn't really owe it to anyone to give further explanation as to the whereabouts or results of any of these people. He made a show that he was proud of. Leave him alone. Like, it's his life. This is getting insane. But then TikTok has the gall to take Richard Gadd's statement telling them to back off and instead double down and go, well, if it wasn't him, Richard Gadd would have said in his statement that it wasn't Sean Foley. And it's like, okay, detectives, like, you figured this out. Well done. And it's like, just so disappointing that the show is being talked about and handled this way. Hi guys, I'm coming to you from the future. Literally as I was editing, that crazy TikTok guy that was creating fake Instagram DMs with Richard Gadd has started creating t-shirts that are mocking Richard Gadd and saying that Martha did nothing wrong and Richard Gadd deserved it. So clearly he's someone who has formed a parasocial, vicarious, just gross relationship from afar with Richard Gadd, and is now getting all salty that there's any pushback on him at all, and has started like an anti-Richard Gadd campaign. Like, look at these fucking shirts. Absolutely nuts.
Onions have layers. Ogres have layers.
One of my favorite things about this show is the fact that it wasn't super black and white. Richard Gadd has said this in multiple interviews, that he wanted this to be a deep character analysis of both Martha and himself, and explored that they were good and bad in both of them.
I'm brutally honest with myself in the show as well. Like, there's a lot I didn't do right. You know, it's not just a victim narrative. I think it would have been easy for me to do this show and sort of be like, oh, I offered a cup of tea to a stranger, aren't I wonderful? And then, oh my God, it ruined my life. But no, I made a lot of mistakes on the way, and I didn't behave appropriately in a number of scenarios, which made the situation worse.
This is consistently monologues throughout. Donnie as a character explicitly talks about the fact that the attention felt good, that he knew he needed to set boundaries for both Martha and Darian, and that to me is what made the show so fascinating, brave, and powerful. However, I feel like all over TikTok, I've just seen people misunderstanding this show completely. You've got some people on one side being like, Donnie is not a victim at all, he brought this all on himself, he's an absolute idiot, and this is a show that just shows how good setting good boundaries are, which I feel like is reductive and oversimplified, and does constitute and classify as victim blaming.
So he is not a victim. I don't care what happened to him. It doesn't matter what happened to him. You be clear with people and you tell them no.
However, on the other side, you have this really frustrating phenomenon where basically people have taken the show, ignored all of the self-criticism that Richard Gadd and Donnie Dunn kind of did to themselves, and gone, actually, if you have any criticism about Donnie Dunn or Richard Gadd, you are in the wrong and you are victim blaming. I think this is an absolutely sort of unhinged way to look at the show. I'll show you a TikTok slideshow I read today. So in quotes, they have, we need more male SA survivor representation. You guys are literally proving that you can't handle male survivors. This poor man is the example. This woman stalked, threatened, and SA'd him. So many of you have been defending her. She's just mentally ill. It's because she's a woman. She's getting so much hate. She just needs help. She's mentally unwell. His ego is being fed. He is a victim who survived his abuse. Now, yes, I agree. Richard Gadd, Donnie Dunn, was a victim that suffered abuse at the hands of Martha at multiple points. However, the fundamental core of this show is a psychoanalysis of how you let these sort of people into your life. Episode 4 is a recontextualization of everything we just saw, and is meant to inform why he has such a lack of boundaries and lack of kind of like survival instincts. This is a character analysis and critique of Donnie Dunn as much as it is Martha, and there are several things he did wrong in this show that the show wants to highlight. Richard Gadd wrote this into the core DNA of the show. And I've seen so much discourse on Reddit and TikTok that anytime you actually question anything Donnie did, people are very quick to jump down your throat and be like, hey, this is victim blaming. And it's like, it just really creates a tough situation for people that actually want to have in-depth discussions about ideas that the show was presenting. Again, I just want to stress, I'm not saying that Donnie wasn't a victim. He absolutely was. I'm just saying that a core part of this show is analyzing his own shortcomings. And I just think that the internet's idea that if we do this, we are inherently victim blaming is really strange. While we're on this topic, again, Richard Gadd actually talked about this phenomenon of having empathy for the abuser and this being a really complicated story to unpack rather than just a simple tale of victim and villain.
I was very keen for Martha to be layered, to show the side of stalking that it is a mental illness and show the fact that there was someone there who was doing a bad thing, who wasn't necessarily a bad person, that just had a lot of trauma in their life that they were going through, and no one brought that to the screen like Jess.
So the interviewer asked, one of the aspects that makes the show so fascinating is your empathy towards Martha. Why was that important to highlight? Richard then says, I have a bit of empathy overdrive sometimes, but it's not like anything I've seen on television before. Stalking usually is depicted as someone who's kind of evil, whereas I felt like there was a vulnerable person who genuinely couldn't stop. Who, for whatever reason, had believed the reality that was inside her head and no matter what couldn't change from that. I mean, it is a mental illness and I want to portray that. I did see someone who I felt sorry for. Even in the height of things in episode 7, when he's listening to the voicemails and everything, you still see that he's feeling sorry for her and he's relating to her, even though we're at the end of the journey and he's trying to bring her to conviction. Even after that, in the courtroom when she gets pulled away, their eyes catch for the last time and there's nothing scary about it. It's two broken people. Their eyes meet in the room knowing that their lives are not going to be the same again without each other. He actually offers even more insight into the idea that both parties did make mistakes. The interviewer asks, obviously, the show is very personal and honest about the complexities of the situation and the mistakes you may have made. How does it feel to have shared it with the world? It feels quite daunting, but people have been really nice and it's affected people. As much as it is an examination of stalking and abuse and love and loneliness, I really wanted it to be an examination of the ramifications of trauma. And I think that's quite subtle in the show, but a lot of people are really getting that aspect of it. They see Donnie and they're appreciating someone's self-destructive tendencies in the wake of trauma, and I think people are finding a great comfort in that, honestly. Then he's asked, what do you think is connecting the most with viewers about Baby Reindeer? To which he says, I think it's just honest. We do live in an age now, whether for better or for worse, where people are afraid to admit mistakes sometimes. And I think there's something invigorating about the human condition. We make mistakes. We fall in and out of love. Sometimes the people we love the most, we can't treat as well as we want. It has these difficult themes and characters struggling to exist in the world and the loneliness and the disassociation that people feel from life. I think it's way more common than it's given credence to. I think the authenticity of Baby Reindeer just screams out of the television. Let me read a comment that I got. It's not an idea though, it happened, facepalm. Awfully ignorant and stupid review. You kept saying the show, but it happened. It's irrelevant what we question as a show. This idea that we can't critique the show or critique any character choices or talk about anything that didn't really work as an audience because this is a true story and it's a story about assault. I think this is absolutely insane because in theory it should go the other way. I should also not be able to give it praise for how it's written or for how it's told because apparently it's just a true story and that's how it happened. I think that's just such a silly way to look at this show. For example, I give mad praise for how well done episode 4 is, for how it's revealed, for the choice to withhold that information for the first 3 episodes and present it at episode 4 and to completely recontextualize the relatively lighthearted first 3 episodes we've seen. An absolutely stellar writing choice. That is a choice that is made for television. That is a choice that is made for a fictionalized format. I think that needs to be commended, but as a result, when we watch a show, even if it's based on a true story, you still need to judge it on its merits as a show, as a story. For example, Bohemian Rhapsody is based on a true story, all right? That was a real guy and a lot of that stuff in that movie happened. But the way that movie communicated passage of time and character motivations was clunky as fuck.
Can I borrow it for Sunday church?
As a result, I don't think the movie is that good. You often hear this conundrum about true story material where if someone goes, oh, I didn't really like when the character did this, or I didn't really understand when the character did that, or I didn't really feel it was communicated well, you'll have someone saying, well, that's the true story. That's how it happened. It's like, as a creative medium, as an audience member, I still need it communicated effectively. But going back to Baby Reindeer, I didn't even have that many critiques of the show myself, but I think this idea that you can't critique character choices at all or question them is really quite strange. And what I mean by that is, yes, obviously this is a true story and how things happened were how things happened in the show. Sure, absolutely fine, I get that. And in theory, you can't really actually critique that. But what you can critique is how these choices are effectively communicated. For example, I can fully buy that everything that happened with Darian happened exactly the way it did in the show. Totally fine with me. I'm not questioning that. However, in that last episode, I found that final interaction they had in the final episode needed a bit more time. I felt like that could have gone for another 5 to 10 minutes to really sink in. It felt a bit rushed and I was a bit confused because they spent so much time on so many other things. Now, that's a criticism I'm allowed to have, and I feel like this knee-jerk response of people being like, oh, well, that's a true story, that's how it happened, you shouldn't question it, you shouldn't question it as a show, is really reductive and really quite silly. Now, for example, to back up what I'm saying, look at this interview from Richard Gadd where he actually talks about developing and changing the story to make sure, even though it's a true story, it still works as a show. So this was for Variety. The reporter asked, what inspired you to take Baby Reindeer from stage to screen? He said, I always thought this had television properties. It has, in my opinion, interesting characters and it's got quite an intense plot and through line. Do you see that, guys? Even the creator, even the guy that lived these awful experiences is talking about in sense of plot and characters. So therefore, I think it's totally fair that as an audience, we do the same respectfully. On top of that, I've seen a bunch of people in my comment section and on Reddit posts basically having this response of like, you aren't trauma informed, we shouldn't be questioning any characters, you need to do your research, do you have a degree in XYZ? If not, you shouldn't be talking about it. It's like, first off, you don't know what I've been through, you don't know what other people have been through, and it's no one's job to qualify their opinion with, as a victim of XYZ myself. And in fact, I normally find that when people qualify an opinion with that, it means their opinion needs extra justification because it isn't that good. But it's like, yes, if I was going to make a 45-minute video where I start literally diagnosing each character with a mental illness based on no degree or research or anything, fine, like have at me and tell anyone else off that does that. But this idea that like certain shows are absolutely void of criticism or just like a deep analysis because it's about sensitive subject matter is crazy. On top of that, in the first episode, I did briefly mention that I thought this was one of the most powerful shows I've seen talk about that type of assault, right? And I said in that first video, I hope that certain men don't start gatekeeping it. And I got a bit of pushback on that, but my main thing is I've seen that play out now. I've seen a bunch of people going on TikTok and being like, see, this is why men can't talk out. This is what women can never understand about male assault. I find it really strange because a lot of people that are resonating with this show the most are actually women who have been through this as well, and they see themselves in Donnie. And my point in that first video was basically just saying, I think this transcends a gender issue. I don't know why we can't come together over a show that explores a sensitive subject matter well. Before I get accused of being a simp or man-hating or anything, I was really disappointed when I May Destroy You came out and a bunch of the discourse around the criticism or analysis of the show was, I don't want to hear from men about this show about female assault. I thought that was really disappointing, especially because within that series there is a male assault that is explored in very explicit detail. My point isn't one of like men shouldn't resonate with this or shouldn't feel empowered by this. They absolutely should. I'm saying my point is I don't want this whole gender politics thing coming into Baby Reindeer the way it came into We May Destroy You and other shows. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want me to talk more about Baby Reindeer, let me know. I feel like this is probably as much as I can possibly say about the show at this point, unless I just do a 2-hour big podcast discussion with some other people. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you'd like me to talk about next, and have a lovely day.